A significant number. I think if you have, you probably have a sense of her level of commitment to bringing issues that are thorny, intractable, often without an immediate solution, bringing these to all of us so as to galvanize, to sort of recalibrate our thinking. There are very few filmmakers that I know who are so completely dedicated to effecting change through the power of the medium of film. One of the things that I just thought we could start with is, if you can give us, the audience, a sense of how you came to all of this, Bess. What was the sort of the catalyzing things in your life that brought about a commitment to doing this type of film in such a sort of rigorous way? You know, because you have covered subjects that are, as I said, many people won't touch. So I'm sure it must have come from something, both within and without. So if you could give us a little background about how Bess O'Brien came to be the filmmaker that she is, I know all of us would appreciate it.
Sure. Well, my background is actually in theater. So I did theater for a long time in New York City, and actually started a theater company here in the 80s called Vermont Ensemble Theater. I grew up in Middlebury. And essentially what happened was after Vermont Ensemble Theater, I met my now husband, Jay Craven, who you all know, and he asked me to stay and make movies with him. So I co-produced his first 3 films. And while I was doing that, I volunteered for a local domestic violence organization up in St. Johnsbury, and decided to work with some women who were survivors on just a writing class, because I was interested in sort of getting back to theater and the arts in that way. And I started this writing class with women who were survivors, and halfway through the class I thought, wow, this would make a really interesting play of their stories. I asked them if they'd like to do that. They said yes. I created a play, sort of a very simple play where they would just come out and tell their stories. And that, we toured it all over Vermont, and it made a real impact. And I realized that the power of them speaking about their stories and the interaction with audience created change in people's perception around domestic violence in the state. And so I thought, we were ending the tour of the live show, and I thought, I really want to preserve this. I'd like to make a documentary film about this process of getting people to tell their stories and how that impacts change. And so I had never made a documentary film in my life, but I had heard about this woman, Mary Arbuckle, who actually lives in Bristol. I asked her if she would collaborate with me, and we made my first film, which was called Journey into Courage, about these women telling their stories. And then I just sort of got the bug, and then I made another film. I was commissioned to make another film about a young woman who had been actually murdered in Rutland, and we followed her family and sort of their healing process around that. Then I made a film about heroin addiction, families dealing with heroin addiction. And in fact, yesterday I met with, I don't know if she's here, this wonderful young woman, 15-year-old, yay! Who's interested in filmmaking. She was like, well, did you go to film school? And I was like, no, I've never been to film school. I just learned by doing. And one of the things that is really important to me as a filmmaker, and I think for many artists, performing artists especially, is you can work so hard on a movie like this. I mean, this took 2 years. It was, we shot 100 hours of footage. I had to make an hour-and-a-half film. Just put that in your brain and try to calculate it. And so when it's done, it's like you want to get it out there, man. You don't want it to just sit on a shelf somewhere. And so both my husband and I are very committed to touring our films extensively in the region where the films are made, and raising consciousness about an issue that at this point is important to Vermonters. So, we've toured this film now. I think we've done 25 or 30 screenings around the state so far. We've got another 30 screenings going out in the fall and winter. And we're going to town halls, and we're going to local public libraries, and I'm doing big conferences, and I'm doing, school screenings, and so the idea is for me to take these stories to the people who are living right next to folks like this, but have no idea who they are. And this film in particular, I call this film, my film, The Cavalcade of Humanity, because it is just a lot of people. And it's like going in and out of these worlds, right? You're just touching into these little moments. Like, you know, somebody walking down the street going, Martha's Kitchen, what's going on in there? What's going on in there? And, you know, just taking you into that little world and then taking you somewhere else. So, yeah.
Let's talk about this film for just a little bit more. So, do you have an impact campaign where you're talking about sort of disseminating the film as widely as you can on a very hyper-local level? Is there, like there was with The Hungry Heart, is there an engagement, an impact plan where you are showing the film to legislators? What is your relationship like with government officials, and do they come to you knowing that you are capable of creating change through the medium of film? I just want to know, is it a symbiotic relationship, and how has it worked out over the years?
Well, sometimes it's symbiotic and sometimes it isn't. I've had a lot of my films in the past major underwriting and funding through the Department of Corrections, through the Department of Children and Families, through the Department of Health. And in all those cases, those organizations have realized that if I'm making a film about foster care, that is really great for Department of Children and Families, because it's going to tell those stories, get it out there. I mean, to this day, they still use that film in all their training. So that I've worked very closely with state agencies and activist organizations. This particular film really came to me because somebody told me that 40% of Vermonters were food insecure, and I was like, what? Whoa. And I just got interested in that subject, and then as we started the film, also I have a couple of major donors who give to me and have been giving to me for years, and I knew, so I went to them and I said, I think I'm interested in making a film about food insecurity, and they were like, great, that sounds good. So I got my first initial money from them so I could start shooting the film, and then very quickly I realized that everyone dealing with food insecurity is also dealing with housing insecurity, and then housing insecurity, the whole hotel thing, we started to hang out at the hotels, and then that just became a whole storyline in itself that we followed, and sort of became a dramatic line for the movie. But in this case, we showed this film up at the State House to legislators. I would say on the road, when I was booked the first leg of the tour, I invited legislators in every community. I think when we showed it here in April or March, we had like 2 or 3 of your local legislators here. I invited the governor 3 times. He never got back to me. I have had governors in the past come to my premieres and come to my shows. I don't think the governor would really approve of this movie, particularly, just between you, me, and a lamppost and everybody in this room.
Do you want to explain that?
Well, I mean, he is, you know, he's been wanting to close the hotel program. He has not, there have been a number of bills that have gone through the House and into the Senate to solve this problem, in my opinion. For instance, this year, all of the housing organizations in Vermont came up with a 10-year plan to solve this problem. And they also came up with a way to pay for it, or for most of it. I think it was like 50 to 70% of the money over 10 years was going to be paid through taxing. And it was going to be taxing anybody who made $500,000 or more, just a little bit more, I think at 2% or something, and then anybody who bought a house for $750,000 in Vermont had to pay an additional tax. And the governor vetoed it. So the governor does not want to raise any taxes. And there's a lot of fear mongering about, you know, this is raising your taxes. Well, it's not really raising probably anybody in this room's taxes because most of us are middle class or upper middle class. It's raising, you know, as Bernie would say, the 1%. And until we really start looking at plans like that to find the money, it's not going to change. So, you know, he did not attend, but I've had, the lieutenant governor came to my premiere, the Speaker of the House came, I've had a lot of food and housing organizations, CVOEO, the Housing Authority of Vermont, you know, a lot of organizations come, see the film, do the Q&As with me, and are also now bringing the film to their organizations to show in their communities or to their staff or whatever. So yes, I like to connect with people on the ground and people who are doing this work and try to impact. And I think that, frankly, somebody who was working in housing said, I do want to thank you for this movie because it has really put a fire under all of our, a lot of the housing organizations to really push next year to pass these bills. And frankly, when we were touring this originally, a lot of people, just regular people, came up to me and said, what can I do? What can we do? And we had a sheet of paper that we handed out to audience members with 35 things they could do in their community around these issues, including the bills that were coming into Congress, into the legislature, and things that they could just do locally to help with this food and housing situation.
So this is a very extensive impact campaign. Can you take us back? I don't know whether this came up yesterday when you were doing a Q&A following the Hungry Heart, but perhaps that created almost a model for effecting change. That was a situation that cried out for change in Vermont. I don't have the same feeling on this film, or this story is actually somewhat optimistic in the sense that you see hundreds and hundreds of people essentially collectively pulling together to do whatever they can. It may not be enough, but it is not nothing. And it is also the awareness raising leads to people wanting to do things to resolve, and because it is an obvious problem. I mean, this differs from addiction in that often addiction situations can be secretive and hidden. This is right out front. All of us walk amongst each other, if you will. So I had a sense of optimism here, which is, it is a difficult problem, but there are solutions. They're right in front of us, and it does take collective will. So I think with this film, you're stimulating responses, but I also think you're galvanizing in a way that sort of magnifies what is available to us right now. Just keep pushing, keep moving forward. Can you highlight a couple of the other things that were on your list, aside from perhaps lobbying your legislatures? You mentioned there were 35 things you can do. Do you remember a couple of ones that you think all of our audience should hear?
Sure. It's everything from finding out who your local food shelf is and donating food, volunteering, giving money. I had somebody who came up to me so Burlington is probably, many of you know, is really struggling with homelessness right now, as all of Vermont is, by the way. Somebody told me that there are tents down under the bridge here. So, Middlebury is not immune to it at all. But somebody said to me in Burlington that, they would walk down every day through the streets of Burlington and walk past the homeless people. And they said, after watching your movie, I stopped and I said hello to somebody, and we had a conversation. It's like, most of them aren't that scary if you actually just say hello, and you don't actually always have to give money. You can just say, hey, how's it going today? I try to do that. I'm not perfect. But it could be a little tiny thing like that. The other thing is thinking imaginatively about housing in particular. For instance, we have a lot of our colleges and universities that are unfortunately going down the drain, the whole state systems, Johnson, Lindenville, whatever. There's a lot of empty dorm rooms. We should be renovating those into housing. Goddard College just went under. That's an entire campus. They're now thinking about putting some housing onto that campus. Tiny homes. My sister lives in Austin, Texas, and there's a great community there that has created, 35 tiny homes and a little farm, and people live there. And so part of what I'm trying to do is get people out of this state of there's nothing we can do. It's a dead end, whatever. What was really interesting to me showing my film yesterday, which was this film called The Hungry Heart on the opiate epidemic 10 years ago, which, by the way, has now raised its head again, is that film, for better or worse, is totally relevant right now, 10 years later. And there was a legislator who came to the screening yesterday in the front row, and she stood up and she said, I am begging you to bring this film back to Burlington. You have to bring this film back to Burlington. So that film could maybe come back and change the minds also. But all these issues are, addiction. Part of the reason we're seeing everybody out on the street and we're all like, ew, oh my God, is because we don't have housing for them. So we need to, all these issues intersect with each other. And, it's in the world of activism, there's a whole, lobbying method that just says housing first. Unless you put people in houses, nothing else can happen. People cannot get jobs, they cannot feed their family, they cannot get mental health. If you do not have a roof over your head, you cannot function. And if you cannot function, you cannot move forward in your life.
Let's go to the audience for a moment. We have a mic here. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for making this film. You mentioned the issue of not in my backyard as pertains to affordable housing. And you also said that you've shown your film around the state. Do you get any sense there's a softening of that sentiment after people actually watch your film and see what people have to go through just to keep themselves warm and safe?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I think that, you know, people often ask me, you know, well, why do you make these films? They're so intense, you know, and how do you keep yourself sane? And maybe I don't know. But what I am always amazed at is just, I fall in love with all the people in my movie. I think, especially in this film, these people are, I mean, I don't have to sit down at the beginning of the week and figure out what every single meal is and if I have enough food to feed my family and exactly what I'm going to eat and when I'm going to eat it. You know, I am privileged not to be able to do that. You know, I don't have to worry about where all my shit is. Like, I know where it is in my house. It's not in some trailer and it's not left somewhere else, or it's not, you know, I'm not storing my food in my closet, whatever. All of these things are stressors that most of us don't have in our lives, and hopefully what you're seeing in the film is you're not pitying these people. At least I don't. What I say is, my God, these people are incredible. Like, how do they freaking, like Colby, Alicia with her 5 kids? I mean, I would have like killed myself if I was living in a hotel room with 5 children that I take care of for a year. I mean, geez, I'm crow, you know. So to me, these people have resiliency. They have, I mean, if you were ever to actually give them a full-time job and get them out of this thing, they would actually be very incredible members of society. When you look at Colby is awesome. She's a hard worker. She was working 2 jobs. She actually had money to put down on an apartment, and Vermont simply could not find. There was nothing. So she moved to New Hampshire. What a waste. What a shame, okay? So to get back to your question, I think that part of what I was trying to do in this movie is to say, because I think we all have this idea of homeless people. They all are, you know, drug addicted. Okay, fine, maybe some of them are, and that's okay. I mean, that is an issue too, but many of them are just working people who are just trying to get it, keep themselves together. They're going to work, they're doing their thing. So maybe we don't have to be so afraid of them. Maybe if, you know, Montpelier builds a low-income housing 30-unit thing, or Middlebury somewhere downtown, we actually won't all, you know, it won't be a horror film. We're running out of town with our hands like this. Like, maybe it'll be actually okay. So I think that, you know, not in my backyard is a real thing, and liberals tend to be on the right side of this issue until somebody says we're going to be, you know, we'd like to build a low-income housing unit in downtown Burlington, and then people, or Middlebury, and then people are like, whoa, you can't do that, So, you know, I mean, a lot of times when I tour my movies, I'm also touring with the people in the film, and they would be up here with me, and that's another hit to the heart, because you see this movie and then you see Colby walk out here, and then what are you gonna do? You know, she's a human being. She's like a good person. She's a cool person. You know, I mean that last hotel that we went to, the Cadillac Hotel. Oh my God, we just happened to stop by there. I was like, I could have made a whole movie about the characters in this hotel. That dude that came out with his mask on, hilarious, absolutely hilarious guy. I mean, I was like, can I just make a movie all about you, you know? So I, as a filmmaker, I often think of myself as an anthropologist in a way. I'm like interested in looking deeper into communities that I don't know about and just getting to know them more. I also have to give a shout out to my mom, because she was a social worker. And I think that growing up in our family, you know, she would take us around to like the local, you know, food bank or social service organization, and I always knew that that was something that it's not those people, right? As Colby says at the end of the movie, we're not burdens, we're people. We're part of your community, and actually, why wouldn't we want to house these people? Wouldn't we rather have them in a house that is safe and that they feel safe in than on the street where they can commit, can get in more trouble? I mean, we don't want that, so we should be wanting housing, absolutely.
I do think your films are completely about discovery, revelation, and they're utterly non-judgmental, which is, they're accessible. And this film was a really good example of that, because as you're talking to dozens of people in dozens of situations, and there's no judgment. It's just the understanding of what they're going through on a daily basis or a monthly basis. The fear of the eviction fear is an underlying theme in this movie. That's that ticking clock.
Yeah.
And the state has, I wouldn't say resolved it, but they've extended it into it came into this year.
Yeah.
But no new people are being allowed to go into the program. It's just those who have managed to somehow survive over the last 2+ years. I thought that also created a lot of anxiety for people. I mean, what happens when we have to leave here? We really have nothing at that point.
You also have a situation where the hotels are open for 8 months, and then we're going to close them, and then, oh no, we're going to keep them going for another 4 months, and then maybe you'll be thrown out, maybe you won't, and so it becomes this whole thing where people are always on edge, and it's not only the stress for the people in the hotels, it's also the stress every year the legislators have to deal with this, and okay, now we have to deal with the hotels again. And all the social service organizations, the grassroots that have to deal with people coming in and out of these hotels, is putting a huge stress on social service organizations, all of which are underfunded, don't have enough people, and now they're having to deal with this back and forth thing. So it's not a good system at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So,
who else has a question for Bess? Yes, there are many. Go ahead. Right there, David. Go up a little bit. Right on the aisle, right there. There you go. And then we'll go back across the aisle.
I know the film is focused very much, totally on Vermont, but given the national situation, the varying attitudes towards homelessness across the country, what do you think the impact is going to be of the recent Supreme Court decision giving states and other entities the right to clear homeless encampments?
I mean, I think it's a terrible situation. So if people don't know, the Supreme Court just passed a law saying that, I think it's state by state, can make the decision to just clear out tent cities and just not have anybody be on any public land. To which I said, okay, well then they should go to people's private lawns. Maybe that would be a little bit different. You don't have any place for me to live, so I can't go, into the public park, and I can't go onto the public square, and I can't go wherever. So I guess the only place left is the front of your lawn. And let's see what people have to say about that. What do I think about it? I think it's going to create a lot of havoc, and I think it's going to be really hard. And this is not, Vermont, as you might have heard, we have the second highest homelessness rate behind California.
Per capita, yes.
So that's not a good statistic for little Vermont and our progressive outlook. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's certainly not going to help the situation.
We got a question across the aisle right there. Go ahead, are you ready? Go.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed the film, and it put a personal face on that issue. Now, you just mentioned Vermont has the second highest rate of homelessness in the country. And yet, you also mentioned that Phil Scott, the governor of Vermont, has refused to see the film. Now, Phil Scott is the most popular governor in the United States, and yet Vermont has the second highest rate of homelessness. Can you tell us what's going on?
What's going on? I mean, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I think that, look, Phil Scott got us through COVID. I listened to him every single day at noon. I thought he was really great. He's not Trump. Sorry if there's any Trump people. He's a fairly moderate Republican. I think we've all sort of galvanized around him. But on these particular issues, in my opinion, he's way out of touch. And he's not really dealing with it. He's pushing it. A legislator came up to me and said, Bess, part of the problem is terms are 2 years. So nobody looks long term. It's all just 2 years more, and then I have to get voted back in 2 years. So people are, it's the dike thing. It's just sticking your finger into a dike. That's to me what a lot of this film is. It's not looking at, oh my God, how are we going to solve this? We need to be on this for 10 years. We need to be really thinking strategically, innovatively, looking at, I think is it New Zealand or Finland has no homelessness, okay? 10 years ago they said, we don't want any homeless people. They figured it out. I don't know what they did. Well, I do know what they did. They said we're not gonna stand for this, and they raised some taxes and they built innovative housing, and they have no homelessness. Now that's a country, but it's a small country. Why don't we go over there, find out how they did it, and fix it? So why? Yes, he's a popular governor, but I also think there are a lot of people who, I mean, this is why I'm touring this movie, need to know more about the fact that this is going on, and these people are their neighbors. They are the people who are waiters at the restaurant. They are their people who work on their cards. These are regular people. And the fact that the governor is, I mean, what the governor's big push this year was changing Act 250, which was to make it easier to build housing. But all the statistics show that is just one tiny, tiny part of low-income housing. You must have funding behind it. That's not going to really change much. It'll change a little bit, not much. Yeah.
How can we get the 35 list?
What?
How can we get the list of 35 things to do?
You can go onto our website, Kingdom County Productions. It's there.
Yeah. KCP. Is it KCP.org?
Kingdom County Productions. Yeah,
.org.
.org. Yeah.
Yeah. Kingdom County Productions.
My question has to do with job training. Were you thinking you might want to add that to the film, but you couldn't find something, or it just was beyond the scope of how to raise the job skills of people so that they can afford the housing that might be available?
Yeah, I didn't do the job training thing. I mean, it's always hard as a filmmaker. It's like you could do so much. I mean, frankly, this film could have been a 3-part series. No, I didn't focus on that. It's a good idea. But once again, I'm not sure. I think job training is important, but like a lot of these people had jobs. Like it's, yeah. And that was not the problem. They could, part of the thing is you're looking at a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,200 or $1,500 in Burlington, or even in a small town. That's a lot of money for a low-income person. Although Colby, at one point in the film, says, I probably could have spent $1,200. I had worked 2 jobs. It would have been really tight, but I could have done it. That is a lot of money. I mean, that's almost my mortgage, So the other thing is the cost of rents need to go down. But yes, of course, job training is important, but I think a lot of people out there already have jobs. And once again, if you don't have a home, you can't get a job, because you can't even work at McDonald's unless you have an address. They're not, it's like, I live in a tent on da-da-da, or I'm, you need a place where you live in order to get paid. You need a bank account, you need basic things. So those things need to happen first, but job training obviously is very important.
Who else? Maybe we should go to this side of the room. Can we come over here for a second? Thanks.
Thank you so much for making this incredibly moving, deeply human film, deeply human-centered film. I think there has been a lot of questions already. I want to just shift a little bit, maybe for the filmmakers in the room, the ones that we are called to also work in films that lead to social impact campaigns. And I was curious, when you do start showing your films in festivals and communities and state legislation and so forth, a lot of times we filmmakers, the industry, tell us to do it in a certain way. It's called windows of releasing, first this, second that, third that. But I was curious about your own experience with this releasing timing, if you will, because it seems like it's such a pressing, such an urgent, critical issue that you may consider or not going in the traditional way to really release your film, or just release it widely because the urgency?
Yeah.
This has to do with the way you get your film out versus standard windows of distribution. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Talk about that?
In a way, yes.
The timing.
Timing of how she does it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I knew, for instance, I premiered this film just as the last 3 months of the legislature here in our state. So these issues were all on the docket, like these bills were passing through the Montpelier legislature. So while I was touring this film, people were coming to my movie, and then I was making them aware of the legislation, and the legislators were coming to the audiences and telling them about the legislation. Frankly, the governor never did come to this film, but he sent 2 of his top people to come have coffee with me, and that's an interesting little conversation where they were like, "Love your movie. You're so important. We just, we want to make sure you're getting out the governor's side of the story." What exactly are you talking about in the Q&As? I was a little bit interested. It was like, wow. It's like, I feel like I'm in a CIA undercover thing right now. They were nervous about the movie.
Yeah.
They were a little bit nervous about the movie. And I sort of said, oh, no, it's very open conversation, which it is. So I think that it ruffled some feathers, for sure. I mean, they know about the movie. Maybe I sent the governor a link of the film, and I said, well, if you don't want to come to the movie, you can watch it in your living room. But the point is, I get out my films pretty much after they've been edited. I do everything. I produce the film, I raise the money, I direct the film, and I co-edit. And then I do the entire distribution. So I market the entire film, I do all of the bookings, and I do it in a way, and then what happens now is that now other people are booking me, which is what I like, because then they just call me and say, I want you to come here, and this is what I'll pay you. So, I sort of lay the groundwork, and then I get booked after that. My film, The Hungry Heart, was a different situation, which is that the governor at that time, Shumlin, heard about the film. This was when we had a big opiate epidemic. It was a scourge across the whole country. And he called me, his office called me and said, the governor wants to do his entire State of the State in January on the opiate epidemic. And he would like to focus on your film in his State of the State, and he would like to honor the people in your movie. Can you come to the State of State? Can you be part of the press conference? To which, of course, this was like, it was like fantastic. And so he did that speech. We did the press conference, and it became a national story because this particular governor was the first governor in the country to really talk about the fact that this was an opiate problem in a rural state. And people often see Vermont as a perfect state, like how could we have a problem? And so it showed up the next day in the New York Times on the front page, and that raised, everybody was now coming to Vermont, doing stories about Vermont, what we were doing, and then the film became a big part of that. So, as a filmmaker, you just catch those waves. Sometimes you don't. I've made plenty of movies that have just played and they've raised consciousness and they are used for this and the other thing, but they're not hitting at a particular time when something is particularly happening. And so, that's just in some ways the luck of the draw, right? But I just do it all myself, and because I figure nobody else is going to do it for me. Maybe someday somebody will, but.
Just, I want to ask the audience a couple more questions for Bess in a minute that I want to ask, but there are organizations that I've encountered here in Vermont, both locally and also around the state, and I would like anybody who wants to just quickly state an organization that they may be working with, whether it's mainly about food insecurity. Please stand and just tell us what that is so others can do something. First thing here in our town in Middlebury, many of you went to a party at 51 Main last night. Part of that entire aggregation of businesses is something called the Giving Fridge. And the Giving Fridge is a nonprofit that prepares meals and delivers those to folks who are food insecure in Addison County and elsewhere. The way that's paid for is by the plants that you see in that store. There's a very large array of plants that are on sale there. When you buy a plant, at the other entity is called Everything Nice. When you buy anything from Everything Nice, the money goes to the Giving Fridge, so they're able to contract for, finance the meals that are prepared and then delivered. So that's number one, right here in Middlebury. The second thing is an operation called Salvation Farms. Salvation Farms is organizing a massive gleaning effort, G-L-E-A-N-I-N-G, gleaning, which is an Old Testament concept. You shall let them glean at the edge of your fields. I've done this for several years. Go to an apple orchard, go to a place where squash is rotting on the vine. And basically, Salvation Farms makes it possible for you to be part of a collection of food, usually in the fall, which then, of course, is processed in Winooski and spread around the state to various food banks. Look up Salvation Farms if you want to be out in the fields, physically go out and work, collect food, which otherwise it will just be on the ground for birds and animals. It is an immensely helpful organization. They will take your donations as a nonprofit. Liz Robinson is here working with our local project Hope, is that right?
Yeah, Hope is really our foundational.
Can you give her the mic for a second? Thank you, David.
I was on the board, I have another board member right behind me, but Hope is really our foundational organization that helps low-income families in Addison County and beyond, and there's a very successful food shelf, and they also help low-income families in a myriad of ways, housing, energy assistance, all kinds of things. So, and I think that we have Bess speaking at an event coming up really soon, which is really exciting. So Hope, yes, please support them.
Does anybody else have a suggestion, an organization that they've worked with? If you don't, that's fine. But if you do, just sort of shout it out real quickly and we could, no? Okay.
I mean, actually, talk about lots of footage. I did a whole sequence with Salvation Farm.
Yes.
And wanted to get them in the movie, and they ended up on the cutting room floor, unfortunately. But they are a great organization.
They're doing fantastic work.
Yeah.
Thousands of tons of food that otherwise would go astray. Last for you, what is next? Because I'm assuming there are multiple nexts for Bess O'Brien. So tell us at least one or two that might be upcoming.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm trying to find the inspiration fairy. You know, I haven't quite figured out what my next film is yet.
The inspiration fairy.
Yeah, something that inspires me, you know. The inspiration fairy for filmmakers, like, bing, that's what I want to do, that's what I'm excited about, right? I would like to maybe do something, I'm playing around with something about what's working around community. I mean, we are in a world right now where loneliness is like a major mental health issue, and community and belonging and connection is really important. So I'm maybe interested in looking at small ways and large ways that communities are coming together to work together to create connection as a positive force. So something maybe a little bit more hopeful, or things that are working like every day that we take for granted. I mean, you see that, I think, in all my movies, but I don't know yet. I mean, it's you know, I'm lucky that this film is having a life, so I'm able to be on the road with it for a while, which means that I can ignore my next movie. I can pretend that I don't need to start making a movie again.
Yeah.
And as I get older, Lloyd,
Yes.
movies are harder to make because they're just a lot of work. They're a heck of a lot of work, and you know.
And when you're doing it all yourself, it's sort of a one-person show. Yes, that magnifies it.
Yeah, but you know, I do love it, and I've made a lot of movies, and so you know, I hope I continue to make more.
Bess O'Brien has made a big difference. She's very modest about this, but this is one of the people who have made game-changing films that I think have changed the dialogue, the character of the state, in this state. Please give her a huge round of applause. All of her work.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Welcome.
And we're going to miss Lloyd. This is his last year.
It's my last Sunday as festival
Last
producer.
Sunday. Yeah. Yay, Lloyd.